Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the Pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast. We teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode. I am Michael O'Neill here in sunny Long Beach, California, joined by Mircea Marariu there in Boca Raton, Florida. What's up, dude?
How are you doing, my brother?
Today was my first day back on court, kind of ish. And if you guys didn't hear in the last episode, I was in the hospital for a few days, and I'm definitely very low on energy and stamina. It was the stamina thing that was really interesting because I would have like a tiny little gas tank and I'd get through a point or two, then I'd be like, whew, I got to rest a little bit and then kind of go back into it. But it was nice to get out and move around, and nice for my watch to see that I was moving around as a human.
You mean that limited stamina is different than usual? I'm glad to hear that.
Hey now. Wow. Just tough room.
Shots fired already.
Shots fired. Guys, two quick things. If you're looking for a brand spanking new carbon true foam paddle, crbnpickleball.com. Use the promo code 402P at checkout for 10% off everything you order, including their really cool new Sage sweatshirt that I got. And if you haven't heard this as well, we have a new Patreon account. And if you want to support the show, if you feel like you've learned something from any of these episodes, Mircea and I would very much enjoy your support. And that is at 402p.com/support. We're going to have a bunch of really cool things, including live streams where we can all kind of hang out together and get questions answered and do kind of a live coaching while we're there. But today we are going to learn about something that's kind of nothing, and then it's kind of really something. Meaning, this is a skill that if you learn it, can get you 2 or 3 points per game, and we can all be better at it. We've been on each end of this ourselves, and that is learning to let out balls go out. And we hit a lot of balls in that we shouldn't. We should let them fly if they're above the chest. You know what do they say? They say chest high, let it fly. And that's really it. So just chest high, let it fly, you guys. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you the next. No, there's more to it, isn't there, Mircea?
Your ultra bite-sized pickleball podcast summed up in one.
It's one Reese's
phrase.
Pieces. There's a lot more nuance to this, isn't there?
There is quite a bit where some of the biggest points will be decided because someone lets an outball go or hits an outball inadvertently and keeps the point going, or just misses where the ball just kind of glances off either your body or your paddle and the ball that was going out. It's happened on match points, both against me and both ways, where I've hit an out ball that's hit the opponent and vice versa. So it's a critical skill that once you get better at it, it will improve your winning percentage significantly, especially in tight games. So let's get to it.
Yeah. And to your point there, we've each been on each side of it. And it's such a bummer to have hit an out ball. You're coming in on the transition zone. You hit a ball that you know was going out and you hit it anyway and you go, damn it. And then you end up losing the point in some sort of firefight. And you go, that was totally my fault. This thing could have ended 2 shots in. And I blew it because I didn't let the ball go out.
Yeah, and that's one thing you have to get over immediately. I kind of dedicate this podcast to the poor souls that have partnered with me regularly locally in rec games that are hard of hearing on one side from hearing me say no when the ball is going out. And it's a lot easier to see from the partner's perspective because you're watching the opponent and you can see the trajectory of ball a little bit more easily and your partner's getting attacked. It is somewhat easier, but these are all really important things that you can pay attention to. And let's start at the beginning. Number one, you want to read the room. What's the environment? Which way is the wind blowing? If you are against the wind, you are far more likely to keep the ball in, and it's a little bit easier to attack people. So if you are with the wind, so if the wind is at your back, not only do you have to pay attention to keeping the ball in by hitting it more gently, but when you're with the wind, when you attack, it's more likely that the ball is going out. So your opponents can pay attention to that and let balls go. If you are against the wind is going towards you, you know that a lot of those are going to fly. I often pick side or end when I choose at the beginning, whether you want to serve or pick end. I often pick end, and I want to end against the wind if possible, because I like the ability to be able to speed up. And if the opponent counters, they have a tough time keeping it in because the wind is at their backs. Next is what ball are you using? So if you're using a Dura, which is a relatively hard ball, or a Vulcan, which is kind of in between a Franklin X40 and a Dura, or if you're using Franklin, those are harder, softer, and with Franklin being the softer one. So an example is a Franklin at the US Open in late April, beginning of May in Florida. Those balls are going to be much softer. So they are less likely to fly and more likely to stay in. Whereas if you're using a Dura in Arizona in 40-degree weather, those balls are flying. So that's one of the first things to pay attention to.
The other thing is, what's the temperature? Kind of along a line with the balls is if we're playing, contrary to popular belief, it gets a little chilly here sometimes, and we're playing it in 41 degrees. A Dura at 41 degrees is going to fly differently than a Franklin at 41 degrees. It's just going to go out. The Franklin ball is a little softer. And you just got to make sure that you know what the temperature is, because the colder it gets, the harder the ball is, and the more it's going to sail. And the more it's going to dip when it's hotter, especially if you're playing with a Franklin ball in like high humidity. You're in Florida in the middle of the summer. That ball's going to dip a lot more than you might expect if you live in Denver, or if you live in a place that's a little bit cooler or a little bit less humid. Yep. So paying attention to the detail of that is really important. And then I was completely burned by this the last time I was in Denver. Denver's a mile high. It is legit real altitude. When you walk up some steps in Denver, you feel it in your lungs, and you certainly see it on the pickleball court. I had such a hard time keeping my serve in the court because the altitude was so much higher. And weirdly, a lot of people don't think about that, but it really matters. So if you're playing sea level, it feels very different than if you're playing altitude. And again, you're playing percentages on that. If you're closer to the coast, it's probably higher humidity. Ball's going to dip a little bit more. So you just have to pay attention to what the altitude is, what the temperature is. And these aren't like end all be all, but they are things to note before you start the game.
One nice thing about playing indoors, so if you're indoors versus outdoors, you don't really have to worry about the wind or the temperature as much. Now, I do find that the ball tends to fly a little bit more indoors, and when we've been playing in the National Pickleball League, all the venues are indoors, and it is a little bit more of a drive fest. So it is important, especially during those matches, to keep an eye on out balls. Another thing is really the opponent's paddles. And I used to coach this when I remember specifically coaching Major League Pickleball in Mesa, Arizona in the beginning of the year. When it was dry, it was cool. And I remember we were playing against players that had very hard paddles. They were using PaddleTech paddles, or they were using Engage paddles. And those are difficult to reset in cold weather with hard balls. And at that time, they were using the Duraballs. So it was a whole constellation of factors. But if your opponents have paddles that are very stiff and hard and tend to fly on counters, so the ball tends to fly with counters, that's something to pay attention to even before you start the game. And along those lines, in terms of preparation before you even start the game, you can watch your opponent's technique, especially if you've never seen them play before. When you're warming up, I always pay attention to see the technique of my opponents. And you can see that they may have a particular type of grip where they hit the ball very flat, or they tend to have open faces with the paddles, or they have really poor technique where they have trouble getting over the ball. They can't generate a lot of topspin, or vice versa. When they have really good forehand drives, where they can generate a lot of topspin, or backhand drives, or whatever. So this is something that you can pay attention to right before you start the game and get a good idea about what kinds of balls and which player is going to hit out balls.
Dude, I love that. I love that. And I historically have played that in such a fun way. Like if I was a sub on someone's like men's softball league, and they'd come in on Tuesday, we're having our, and I'd walk up to the plate and I'd take a couple of cuts, and I had the wrong grip on the bat, and I swung weird. And there I'm watching them come in. I'm like, cool. And they just cranked a shot. And I did the same thing in racquetball, where when I was warming up, I would warm up intentionally weird so they wouldn't know what I actually had. So you guys can play the chess game if you want. Anyway, you got to know where you are on the court. That's kind of the next part of this, is preparing for letting the ball to go out. Man, the number of times I've hit a knee-high ball 1 or 2 feet inside the baseline and then looked and gone, how did I just hit that ball? That was so out. I just did it. I didn't realize where I was on the court. It really matters where you are on the court in terms of how this thing is going to land. And man, there's some real safe zones and there's some zones that you're like, I cannot believe I'm in the middle of the transition zone and the ball came in my chest and I bothered to hit it.
One thing to remember that when you're in the first third of the transition zone, relative to the baseline, when you're coming up and you've had that split step and nice stable base, where should your paddle be, Michael?
Typically mine is down. Correct. I figure the other team is going to whack it at my feet.
Exactly. But the other reason it's down is because if you have it in the same ready position as you would when you're at the kitchen, which is, let's say, ideally waist high or maybe abdomen or chest high, if you turn to the side and volley, that ball you should let go. You shouldn't be turning the side and volleying because those balls are going out. So that's why you want to have like the goal. I know you love the goaltender mentality. That's when you have the goaltender mentality when your stick is on the ground. So your paddle should be close to the ground.
Yeah, it's almost like you're preparing yourself to hit the out ball by staying waist and chest high with your paddle while you're all the way back versus having it down. That makes sense.
Yep. It's the ball. You want to have a stable base. You want to have a ready athletic posture where you're leaning forward or at least neutral. You don't want to be with your torso backwards or leaning backwards. You want your paddle position in the ready position, the correct ready position. When you're at the kitchen, it's obviously higher than we talked about at the transition zone. So if you're back in the transition zone, you want it to be lower down. When you're maybe in the upper half of the transition zone, closer to the kitchen, that's when you want it to be a little bit higher. But you definitely want to be ready to make the decisions of what's going on the other side of the net. And unless you're stopped, you have really a hard time making those decisions.
So where this thing comes up a lot, it's situational awareness wise, is you've served, they've returned, you've hit your third now, and you're hoping for this nice dipping third ball, and maybe you do hit a great one. Or if you've vice versa, if they've served and you've returned and it's kind of a sitter, if it's like up and a high ball that they can really get a drive on, see how far into the court they are as they're striking this thing, because very often you can just olay that ball. If you see them coming, we'll kind of get into the nuance of it, but if you see them coming in full sprint, they haven't split step, they haven't a stable base, they're swinging for the fences, that ball's going to hit the fences. I mean, you can just stand sideways and watch the thing fly by, right?
Exactly. And vice versa. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making when they come in on the return. They hit a return. They're trying to get up as fast as they can through the transition zone. The opponents drive a third at them. So they drive a third at the returner coming up. The returner doesn't split step. The ball's going out. Their partner says no, and they hit the ball or they chunk it. Or they try to let it go and it's too late. It's really difficult to make that instantaneous decision when you're moving. That's why we talk about split stepping and getting ready. I do not feel the extra real estate that you're gaining is worth the loss of stability. So if you get 4 or 5 feet closer to the kitchen, it's not worth losing that stability in decision making by split stepping and being ready. You are much better able. That's the first decision you make in the transition. And even when you're coming up and you hit a third and the ball's high, am I going to hit this ball or is it going out?
Today was the perfect example of that, Mircea. I walked in with 40% of my playing ability on the court today. And I knew that when I returned serve, I wasn't getting to the kitchen. I wasn't. I just knew I wasn't. I was almost strolling. So the way I adjusted for that is I hit loopier, higher balls just to give myself a little bit more time. But then that gave the other guy on the other side, who has a great, super hard drive, gave him time to step into it and really whack it. So we were probably 60, 70% stepping out of the way and watching it hit the net behind us because he was taking a giant swing. But on my end, I had to be okay with stopping and split stepping in the transition zone because I knew this drive was coming at me before I was able to get to the kitchen. It was so much more important for me to be stable because this guy rips the ball. So I really just kind of hung in there and got ready for a waist-high shot. And if it were any higher than that, I stepped aside and it went 4 feet out.
So let me ask you a question, Michael. Do you think that in a way that this experience where you weren't up to your usual quickness or level of athleticism, did that help you see the game better by kind of slowing the game down?
100%. Interestingly, and we'll get back to this topic in a second, but interestingly, when I went to the challenge courts, which are like a 2.5 to 3.5 level challenge court, I was able to play more consistently at that level than I normally am because I'm typically just ripping the ball. And when I got to play with the men that were a little more that sort of 4.5 plus, 4.75 area, there's things I couldn't do physically. I couldn't burst Like that was like if you lobbed it over my head, it was a point because I wasn't going to run back and get it. But I was really focusing on footwork and getting the right spin on the ball and getting the ball to drop in the spots that I want. And I had a number of really good shots. And I think it was just this lovely introduction into the gentle side of the game that we all need. But it's very difficult. I'm being forced into it right now, but it's very difficult otherwise to get there.
Yeah, I think an experience like this will ultimately help you if you recognize it and pay attention to it. And that's what we're talking about on this podcast, recognizing tendencies and patterns and things that work and reproducing them.
In this particular game, Mircea, I know that one of the guys overhits. I just know it. He does it often. So I already know to watch out for that. And certainly when he's in the transition zone, like if he drives from the baseline, I'm going to give it a look because he's got that same paddle you like, which is the ape. Is it the board apes? What's it called?
The pickleball apes.
Pickleball apes. Yeah, he plays with that same paddle. His ball dips really well now, better than it did before. So he's getting a lot more spin on it. The balls are staying in more than they were. But man, 3 or 4 feet inside that baseline, and it's a really iffy ball because he's a big guy. He's 6'4". And he's a big 6'4". He's 280 or something. He's a big dude. And he just has so much power behind these balls. And he's got the thing taped. You wouldn't believe how much lead tape he has on this paddle. Anyway, so when he drives from there, I'm 40% thinking about taking it and 60% letting it go if he's 1 or 2 feet inside the baseline. Never mind at the kitchen or when we get into a hands battle. What's interesting, though, is you and I recognize the same thing, which is you do a hands battle with someone, you speed up on me, right? And I counter it, and you get it back. So now I'm countering for the second time. That second counter always seems to be out for some reason. That is the one that really gets us, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what the reason is, and we're talking about what to watch for. We're looking for balls that are struck low. So if someone is hitting a low ball, and the closer they are towards the kitchen, the more likely it is for the ball to go out. So if someone is coming in the transition zone, taking a large backswing and they're running through the ball and it's a low, short return and they're trying to hit a third as hard as they can, just get out of the way because that ball has a very low likelihood of staying in. If they're closer to the kitchen and taking a huge swing and the ball is very low, or they're taking a volley with a huge swing and the ball is very low at the kitchen, they have to hit the ball up. So the reason that those counters are going out, the second counters that you're talking about, is the scenario is that, let's say I'm speeding up against you. So I speed up at your chest or torso off the bounce. So it's from below the net, off the bounce. You counter kind of in the same direction back at me at, say, my chest, and my next counter goes down to your knees. I know that if you counter hard on that second counter, I know that's going out every time. Yeah. And especially if some of those other factors apply where you have a paddle tech that's weighted with a crazy amount of weight, you have a lot of power. So that's why those second counters always go out. It's because you're trying to counter hard from below the net on a ball that's being countered hard already, or you're being attacked hard, and those are the ones you want to reset. It's really difficult to keep that second counter in, and it almost always goes out.
It's happening so quickly. I'm curious on your end if when you're in that second shot of yours, you've sped up, I've countered, you've hit that next shot, which is presumably going to go down. Are you already thinking I'm moving out of the way if he gets a hold of this?
Absolutely.
Or is it just you are?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'll tell my partner.
By the time you get to that second one, you're like, if it gets this far, that ball's going out.
Absolutely. And same thing with my partner. I'll tell him that second counter is always going out, again, especially with certain paddles and in certain scenarios like we talked about before.
And the thing is, they'll reveal themselves as well. As you play through this game, you're going to see which teammate can really arc the ball and spin it and dip it. So you're going to probably be less likely to let that one go out, especially with the new technology that's out in paddles. There's still a number of balls every day that I play that we go, wow, that one looked like it was going 3 feet out and it somehow clipped the baseline. So that is happening. So that's something to watch out for when someone's playing with some of the modern, newer paddles, like the Carbon True Foam. If anybody would like that, use promo code 402P at checkout at carbonpickleball.com. But yeah, so they'll show you their tendencies while you're playing, and you may end up having one person that is a flat striker. Definitely. Folks, we're into February now, and I don't know how far along you are in your New Year's resolutions, but I'll tell you something. It's not the time to give up. You're a pickleball player, so obviously your health and wellness are one of the most important aspects of your life. Well, I'm an efficiency guy, and I really like a nice morning routine where I get to do the same thing, and I know that my body's going to feel great. And that's where AG1 comes in. I drink AG1 every single morning as part of my morning routine. The packets also live inside my pickleball bag in case I'm having a long day at the course and I need some extra energy. As an efficiency guy, I want the easiest possible way to get the best nutrition I can in the most compact and timely fashion. You can do the same thing by going to 402p.com/AG1, 402p.com/AG1, and you get this really cool welcome kit. You get an AG1 pouch, which has the powder. You get a shaker, a scoop, a canister to put all that powder in. You get a bunch of travel packs, which are these little individual packets of AG1. You get a little tincture of vitamin D3 and K2, and all of that is right there on your front doorstep. Go to 402p.com/AG1 and join me to get the healthiest possible start to your day. That's 402p.com/AG1. I'll tell you what, I tell, by the way, Mircea, you know this. You guys might not know this. If they're wearing a glove, if they came from racquetball, there is no natural topspin in a racquetball shot. So if they've worked on their shot and they're getting some topspin on it, good on them. But if you show up with a guy who's playing a gearbox or a Pro Kenix paddle, wearing a glove, that dude came from racquetball, and you can typically count on a nice fast backhand counter, but no topspin on that forehand drive.
Yeah, one of the guys I play with regularly is exactly what you're describing. He was a great racquetball player, sponsored by Gearbox, still uses a Gearbox, and he's got great volleys above the net. He has excellent hands, and when the ball's below the net and he's working on speeding up, when he gets you, if you're not recognized it, if you fight his balls off the bounce, you're going to be in trouble because he's quick on that next counter. But if you let them all go, 99% are going out. So that's another thing to pay attention to. Their grip, whether they're hitting flat or topspin. If they're hitting flat, it's going out. If they have trouble coming over the ball, especially at the kitchen and especially off the bounce, it's going to go out. If you can look at their paddle angle, and I have I've trained myself to basically see the paddle angle on counters. And if I see that the paddle angle is with an open face on a counter that they're trying to hit hard, which is again back to what we were talking about that second counter, those balls are going out. So just get out of the way, let them go.
I would say that the easiest tell of everything is how much backswing are they taking to hit this ball they're about to hit. The closer they are to the kitchen, the less backswing needs to happen. If they're taking a full swing and they're anywhere near, I don't know, 1/3 of the way, maybe with the new paddles, let's say halfway through the transition zone, all the way up to the kitchen, if they're taking a swing, that ball's going out. Like, just know it. You can step aside and olay that ball. It's going to fly right by you, and it's going to hit the fence and hit the poor person on the back of the head and the court behind you guys. It's just going to happen. If they have a great drive and a dippy type shot, you can start adjusting your position based on that. But the easiest tell is a large swing close-ish to the kitchen.
Absolutely. And it's reproducible almost every single time. Just let it go. Using all these factors, you can predict the ball trajectory, which we talked about briefly earlier in terms of the ball being low. When they're hitting the ball low, but below the net, it has to go high. And I really think that you need to make the decision using all these factors that we talked about in terms of letting the ball go before it crosses the plane of the net. Yes, when you see a very high ball as it's crossing the plane of the net, and so the ball trajectory is very high, those are going out. So those are pretty easy. If you make the decision before the ball crosses the net, that's what I want people to have the mentality. A lot of times people say, oh, I couldn't get out of the way. Like the ball was coming to my chest or was coming to my face and there's no way I can get out of the way. I want to just kind of politely disagree with that, because you can get out of the way if you make the decision based on the previously discussed factors before the ball crosses the net. Yes, if you make the decision after the ball is already crossed the net and it's on the way 85 miles an hour to your chest, there's no way you're going to get out of the way. So by then it's too late. And we've all fallen victim to that. Everyone is. And you're going to at times for sure when you're not ready for it. But if you're, again, like we talked about before on previous podcasts, if you're always expecting a speed up and you're using these tendencies and other factors to decide whether the ball is going out, you're able to make that decision much sooner, and you'll be able to predict the trajectory of the ball.
This is absolutely a technique. This is something that's learned. This is a learned skill that you can drill. In fact, I just saw this video. I'm going to try to find the video that I was talking about. You and I have talked multiple times. If I'm on the right-hand side, you're on the left-hand side. And I'm playing, let's say, halfway into my box. So I'm centered on the box, and you're playing big middle. You're straddling the center line, and you're playing big middle. We're in a dink rally. You dink to the guy directly across from you. If he speeds up to my right shoulder, that sideline is our third defender. That ball is going out. That is definitely going out. It's like 9 feet or something. It's not a ton of space for them to keep that ball in. If they don't go to my left shoulder, if they're going to maybe to the center line, I'm probably going to take it. One of us is going to probably take that ball. Conversely, if the guy right across from me speeds up to your right shoulder, and this is something this video illustrated a bunch that I promise I'll try to find it and stick it in the show notes, you guys. You couldn't believe how many of those balls were going out. And they weren't going out full sideline. Like if you were going a really steep cross-court attack, these were going out like to the point, like literally the intersection between the baseline and the sideline. They were going out 4 or 5 inches every single time from that point. So we really tend to hit these balls that are sped up. We really try to hit these balls that are kind of chest high and sped up. And we shouldn't be. We should be just turning aside and letting those things go.
No, absolutely. When you're cross court, you have the sideline as your defender. And also when you're straight ahead, you also have the sideline as your defender. We talked about this in the firefight drill. If you're on the right and I'm on the left and you initiate or are being attacked by the person directly in front of you, so you're on the right, the person on the left is attacking you or you're attacking them and the ball is going back and forth. When I'm on the left, I'm going to pinch middle and look. I'm a right-handed player, so I'm going to look for that forehand volley. And I'm not going to be worrying too much about the ball going to my left because that ball is going out. So next time you all are out on the pickleball court and you're warming up, try being cross-court from someone. Let's say you have 2 right-handed players and you're cross-court from each other. So one of you try speeding up or hitting a hard ball to the right side of the player on the other side of the net. So you're both on the right. One person is hitting it to the right. So you're hitting it cross court and see how many of those go out. You have to hit it actually pretty soft to keep it in. So
it's crazy how many go out.
Amazing. Yep.
It really is crazy how many of those things go out. It's something else.
And use the sideline as a defender also when you're straight ahead from someone. So if I'm on the right side and the left side player is attacking me to my forehand, I don't want to be shifted all the way over. I don't want to be right next to the sideline. I want to leave, if I reach my paddle all the way out, I want at least a foot, if not more, of distance from my paddle to the sideline because I don't need to protect that sideline. If they are speeding up that way or hitting the ball hard to it's the highest part of the net. And so I also have the sideline to protect. So I am more likely to protect middle.
Oh, 100%. And this especially matters when it comes from a speed up from a bounce. If it's a speed up from a bounce, you really have a really high percentage because it's coming at your chest typically or higher. Yep. If they're hitting with any sort of pace, when we were drilling, we talk about that kind of secret speed up where the ball is kind of hiding behind the tape and you're speeding up high on them, but that's not a hard speed up. It's a relatively soft one. You're not trying to take the guy's head off, even though he hit me in the neck like 4 times, but that's another whole story. But you're not really trying to hit them hard, but the ball's probably going to stay in the court with that soft ball. Most people don't do that shot. Most people really try to lay into it, and that's how the ball goes out and deep.
Yeah, because that ball is more of a poke. It's not a full swing. Because the way you set up that ball is hitting a few dink volleys. And then the next one, you just kind of pretend you're hitting a dink volley and like push it up over the net towards the opponent's chest. So that's the shot you're talking about.
Yeah, and it doesn't have a lot of pace on it. So that ball is probably going to, even if they move out of the way, it's going to, I call it slow motion death. Oh, and I'm going to coin a new term right now, you guys. One of my favorite shots right now is the PTA. And the PTA stands for planes, trains, and automobiles. It means that when your momentum is going one direction, the ball goes in the other direction, and you're going the wrong way. If you've ever seen that movie. So it's the PTA.
John Candy.
That's right.
Appreciate that remark for sure.
For sure. Talk about fighting low. And I don't understand that based on our notes, and I want you to explain it to me as well, because I don't get it.
Okay, this comes from the time that I started playing with John Sperling, and I was still relatively new to the game, and I was hitting out balls left and right. And I was told that my hand speed is relatively good for my age, but as a consequence of that, people were taking advantage of it by speeding up a little bit high at me, and I wanted to fight every ball. There's nothing more satisfying than having someone attack you and you countering that right down, right back at them, or down for a winner. So that's probably my favorite thing to do in pickleball. And so I took it to the nth degree, and I was trying to fight every ball. So I was hitting a lot of out balls. And John's telling me, what are you fighting high for? You keep fighting high. First of all, you don't have to fight every ball. And then secondly, don't fight high. And what he meant by that was when I was trying to counter, even if the ball was high, like chest high, we talked about chest high, let it fly. So what I've trained myself to do is counter low. So meaning if someone is about to take a forehand, say, off the bounce and speed it up, I'm going to try to counter at my abdomen. So the ball is roughly at my low torso, and that's where I'm assuming the ball is going to be if it's going to stay in. So my paddle will be about the level of my abdomen, and that's where I'm countering. So if they hit the ball above my paddle, it's going to go out. However, if I'm trying to predict and try to get every single ball and fight balls that are my chest or shoulder, I'm going to be hitting a ton of out balls. So a lot of people will say to me, oh, that's a great leave. I didn't actually leave it. I tried to counter, but I countered below the level of the ball. So the ball went above my paddle and went out. So that's a really important concept. Fight low, don't fight high. And that's why I don't love the Scorpion. People are like, oh, what an amazing shot, Scorpion. Oh, Deckel Bar, great Scorpion. Like, you think that Deckel Bar, who is a large human being, I've been directly across from him. It's very intimidating. It's hard to make the ball bounce. But you think he gets down low enough with a Scorpion to not, you think that ball is going in? No, it's not going in. It's a great looking shot and looks super cool and it's awesome. And it's great to commentate when he's playing. But that ball that he's hitting as a Scorpion is going out 99% of the time.
Just for reference, a Scorpion, imagine if you guys were doing a wide leg squat, like all the way down, and reached up to the sky with your paddle and hit an overhead, almost like you were squatting down trying to hit an overhead. So what you're saying is when someone speeds up high, like literally that shot we just talked about, where someone's sneaking that shot, and if he were able to recognize that, he could get down and try to hit that Scorpion down, but generally not an easy thing to do because it's going to be heading around face level. It's just hard to get the ball to go down from there. So it's probably going out. He's more like today I was hitting a guy and the guy said, oh man, I should have let that go out. I said, I didn't give you the choice, man. I hit it right at you. I wasn't trying to get the ball to stay in. I was trying to hit you. Like there's a difference between someone driving and trying to keep the ball in and just not being able to do it, and someone trying to hit a large human being who happens to be right in front of them.
Exactly. But you bring up our next bullet point. So it's a nice transition, Michael.
So that's what I do, baby.
Excellent. You're a professional. I got to give you that. You have to adjust. So if you get that guy the first time and then you get him, okay, maybe a second time, listen, the third time, it's on him. He's got to recognize 100%. That's what you're doing. So you have to adjust. And it can be both ways. So if you're speeding up at someone and you're taking advantage of them not letting all balls go, and for example, if someone is very large, you can go more body, or if their hands are relatively quick and they're really into fighting, you can go a little bit high at their chest or shoulders. You never want to go at anyone's head, ever. So let's clarify that. It's a bad shot, it's in bad form, and it's just really not a good idea. The point is that you can take advantage of people that keep letting out balls go if they're not adjusting. But vice versa, you can make a mental note. Okay, that person has that shot. I hit an out ball. So next time I'm going to make a mental note and get out of the way when he hits that same shot.
Yeah, you play against a guy like Matt Wright. The ball's coming back even if you try to bag him high. He could let those balls go, but he doesn't because he's got that high counter. Yep. He chooses not to because it's there. That same guy I've been talking about all day is that exact guy. You can it's like a cash machine. You can just keep ringing it up. He won't get out of the way. You keep nailing him. And it's like, all right, if you're gonna keep letting me have this shot, I'm not going to worry about how deep this ball is going to go. This is the opposite of what we're talking about right now. But if you happen to be a large human and you keep getting bagged, just start recognizing that they're targeting you because you're large and you're trying to fight them on these shots instead of just stepping out, saying Olé, and going back to take your serve.
Yeah, and one way to adjust on his end, if he's a particularly large human being, he wants to use his reach, yet at the same time, if he's getting attacked and keeps getting hit by out balls, one of the things that he can do is basically step back a few feet from the kitchen and give himself a tiny bit more time to adjust. But if he steps back too far, if he's stepping back 10 to 15 feet, that's when you can roll it at your feet. That's when you can roll it down at his feet. And so that's not what you should be doing.
This is exactly what he does, which is he rarely watches his teammates third and just goes right up to the net. And then he's just a sitting duck, the poor guy. So how to drill this? This is something you can actually drill, which is, I would say that you could do the instigator drill where you're speeding up and resetting to each other. But if you get into a firefight, start working on just letting balls go. Just in that second, especially the one we just talked about, that second counter. You've sped up, they've hit it back to you, you hit it back to them. That second shot is the ball that usually goes out, that second counter. So if you're the instigator, it would have been your third shot, and you let that third shot go and just see what happens. Try it. And you guys each work on that a little bit. Is it one of those things I'm afraid that if everybody knows what you're doing, you know what I mean? Like if you both know what's going on, you may have more of a tendency to try to keep it in the court. You know what I mean? Is this better to sneak it up on your drilling partner, Mircea?
It is a little bit better, but at the same time, you can test the amount of power or swing that you can hit to keep the ball in. And it doesn't really make a difference if you're hitting it in or out in this particular context because you're just trying to get a result. You're trying to do a combo. So that's what a lot of speed ups are. You're either trying to get it at someone's body or make them reach or stretch or get it down at their feet to get a pop-up to hit the next ball. So that's what these drills are. So it's all a matter of trying pace, different spin, different height, different location. So these are the things that you're varying to try to see what happens. So it's an experiment. So one of the experiments might be, hey, I want to let balls shoulder high and chest high go out more consistently. So let me figure out how to do that. One of the things that I really like is to do the same like instigator or attack type drill when one person just feeds a ball that is like a dead dink and the opponent, so the one you're drilling with, has to speed up off the bounce and you practice getting out of the way or countering. So their goal is to hit it hard and it's not to keep it necessarily in. If they do keep it in, then it's a good shot, but you'll be just shocked by how many balls go out. And one thing people have this mentality one thing I've noticed is people have this mentality like, oh, I never want to let a ball go by that falls in, never want to do it. Yet you will statistically win so many more points if you let those balls go. And even if you let a ball go that looks like it's going out and it lands, where does it land? It typically doesn't land 5 feet in. It typically lands right at the baseline or catches the line. So you proved your own point. Like you let a ball go and yes, maybe it landed right on the line, but let 5 of those similar balls go and I bet you maybe one stays in and the other 4 go out. So you're still going to be statistically ahead in the game if you're paying attention and using this skill and developing this skill.
This drill in this, I want to say it's Josh J. Pickleball, who I think has some really good content on YouTube. One person is standing at the middle of the transition zone, right around the center line or so. The other person is across the net and represents the left side player. You've got a basket of balls. This isn't something you can do with just one ball. The person standing in the transition zone feeds what would be a hard type speed up to one of 3 spots: right shoulder, chest, or left shoulder. Those are the 3 spots that they can target. It's your goal as the person at the net to start looking at, especially at those left shoulder balls, start ducking out of the way and seeing how far they go out, and then start thinking about countering, typically with your left or your backhand, the chest high ball, and with your forehand, the ball that's towards your right shoulder. So that's the part where you get to figure out which way, if you want to slide or whatever. But again, you will be shocked, like Mircea said, how many of the balls that are going towards your left shoulder from that spot, which is a very typical spot to get sped up from, they fly. They'll fly. They'll be out and out and out and out. And you'll start messing with the pace and spin and things like that. It'll start tuning you to be able to recognize the balls that are going to be out and it give you a real A-B. So if it's here at my chest, I'm going to hit this backhand. If it's here at my right shoulder, I'm going to hit this forehand. If it's at my left shoulder, I'm out. So my A is my chest, my B is my shoulder, C is a ball that I'm going to leave. And maybe once in a while, to your point, it'll go in, but most of the time it's not.
Yep. And if you're planning on playing tournaments, which hopefully everyone is that's listening, and you're working on the skill, you have to do it during intentional rec play. So the intentional rec play is you go out and you have a strategy or shot you're working on. And this is a skill that would be great if you just focused on during a bunch of rec games. And if you don't do it in the rec games and it doesn't get better in the rec games, you're not going to be able to magically do it in the tournament. Go out this week, work on letting out balls go, notice which balls are struck at your partner, which are likely to go out, and then make a mental note and try to use that knowledge to enhance your skill to let out balls go and work on it. And it's going to get better. And think about all these factors and put them all together. And it's really easy to have a bunch of them put together in your mind, like we said at the beginning, whether it's cold, paddles, wind, etc., and use that knowledge to maximize your skill.
One thing I'll say to kind of wrap a nice bow on this, Mircea, is very often at the beginning of a match, I will take one for the team. I will let them hit a couple of drives and just see if they stay in. You know what I mean? Like my default will be to let it go and just see if they can keep it in. Like if they're doing a third shot drive on us, I'll just let it go and see what happens. Of course, all relative, but very often that ball is going out. And it allows us to start calibrating, hey man, we know that if this guy is at this part of the net or this far into the court and he takes this swing, it's probably not going in. And it allows us to calibrate a little bit for the first game of hopefully a quick two gamer, but maybe sometimes a 3-gamer.
Hey, listen, I can vouch for you taking one for the team because when I first started playing with you, I was shocked how many balls you decided to take in the chest to keep them from going out. So you really took a few for the team when we were playing. So I want to give you a shout out for that.
You're very sweet. Someday you'll say something nice about my playing. Someday. We'll see. Folks, you've now just listened to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, and we very much look forward to you letting all the balls hit the people in the back of the head on the court behind you. Apologies to them. Mircea, thank you, sir. You got any pickleball coming up this week?
A bunch. Got a lot going on this week. I'm playing the Sacramento tournament in a couple weeks, so I'm going to head out to California and be very mindful for balls flying out. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to playing the APP, not this week, in the following weekend. And we actually have a combine for the Boca Picklers, which is soon to undergo a branding/name change, which is exciting. So we have a combine on Monday. I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of people out there and evaluating some new talent.
Wait, so that's different. We're both going to be in Phoenix. You'll be evaluating. I'll be competing at the Phoenix Combine. So you're pre-combining before the Combine?
Yeah, a lot of the teams have local combines. So we, as the Boca team, are going to have a local combine. I think Houston has maybe had a combine already. But yeah, there are other teams that are having local combines. And the NPL national combines are in Phoenix and Houston next month. So I'm going to be at the one in Phoenix, and I look forward to seeing you there, my friend.
Indeed, indeed. All right, folks, you guys have now just listened to another episode of 4.0 Pro. As always, please, if you want to support the show, that is at 402p.com/support for our Patreon. We would love to see you over there. And carbonpickleball.com, 402p at checkout for 10% off your order. Until then, you guys, please go enjoy the pickleball courts. We will talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.